Hold on, folks. We're almost ready to start.
Something like that is possible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that either of those things is remotely going to happen. In the first place, I don't think that stars operate that way. And then, secondly,
All right.
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Andy?
We're going to get into some more of the stuff Ramon's been into. Something that's always interesting to me.
Yeah. But before we do part two, why don't we either of those things that topic here just talking. In the first place,
okay, yeah.
Again, so that they can operate that way. So they can, and then, secondly,
all right.
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Andy?
We're going to get into some more of the stuff Ramon's been into. Something that's always interesting to me.
Yeah. But before we do part two, why don't we either of those things that topic here just talking. In the first place,
okay, yeah.
Again, so that they can operate that way. So they can, and then, secondly,
all right.
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Andy?
We're going to get into some more of the stuff Ramon's been into. Something that's always interesting to me.
Yeah. But before we do part two, why don't we either of those things that topic here just talking. In the first place,
okay, yeah.
Again, so that they can operate that way. So they can, and then, secondly,
all right.
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Andy?
We're going to get into some more of the stuff Ramon's been into. Something that's always interesting to me.
Yeah. But before we do part two, why don't we either of those.
Hold on a second. I'm getting double audio from somewhere. Give me 1 minute. I do not understand why.
Oh, we're here with Ramon on the Greg J channel. Hello, Ramon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. And we have Andy with us. Hello, Andy.
How you going, Ramon? How you going, Greg?
Hey, all right.
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Andy?
We're going to get into some more of the stuff Ramon's been into, which is always interesting to me.
Yeah. But before we do part two, why don't we cover that topic here just talking about.
okay, yeah.
Again, so that they can share. Yeah, so that they can, the audience.
Yes, well, I was reading, and in a video by Walt Thornhill, he shows a paper that Halton Arp wrote, and the paper is called The Observational Impetus for Lesage Gravity. And about 3/4 of the way through it, I kind of got a little alarmed when he said that the Earth is expanding too quickly, and there's a chance that it could either blow up or turn into a star. And I asked Ramon, what would you think about that, Ramon? Do you think something like that is possible?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that either of those things is remotely going to happen. In the first place, I don't think that stars operate that way. And then, secondly, the conditions which led to the destruction of Metis or Hodor, however you want to name this destroyed body, probably had directly to do with Jupiter's motion or motion towards Jupiter, either way, however you want to put that, because we have the Anu Elish, and there's just nothing like that, no mechanism currently happening. We don't have any, as far as we can tell, any Schultz of stars. Now, there are supposedly some exoplanets which are darker than charcoal. There are some wide dwarf stars.
Tom Van Flanders has shown evidence of an exploding planet between Mars and Jupiter.
Yeah, well, that's basically assured. I mean, there in one of my papers, I've got the animated image showing, the Trojan asteroid belts, and you can see that it's related to Jupiter.
Ironically, the planet was named Krypton. Isn't that funny?
There might be some cultural memory there or something.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there's no mechanism currently that we know of. Like I say, there could be some white dwarf star that's cooler than our body floating near us, but that doesn't seem very likely. I mean, in terms of cosmic coincidence values, the chances are very low. We should probably more worry about ourselves or the aliens or something like that.
He speculates where is this matter being and he says in the paper it has to be in the core. It's not going on the surface. It just materializes matter.
Mm-hmm.
That's
maybe, yeah, it's quite possible. That reminds me of Professor Mayle's theory of the planet capturing neutrinos. And there's probably something happening in there, but speculation is only going to take us so far until we probe inside of a sunspot, until we core deep into the center of the Earth. We're not going to know what's inside of each of them.
I'll put the link to the paper. You might find it interesting. He brings up a lot of conversation in this piece. You would enjoy it. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, and I like I say, there are definite signs. I think Patagonia here, so a lot of people don't know about Patagonia for some reason. Patagonia.
Yeah, I would like to know what about Patagonia. So where are we going to?
Well, I mean, you can see the signs of upthrust happening here. I mean, you just don't see mountains like this anywhere. And glaciers don't do this. This sudden shear changes the rock wall. That's not going to happen from either upthrust or glacial. And you look at the vertical these mountains. Here's a classic image of a very famous mountain.
Are you sharing screen?
I thought it was. Let me see here.
I'm not seeing.
I have stopped again. Sometimes I have a hard time with.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked because I don't see anything here.
Again, it's okay because I hadn't gotten very far.
Oh, good. Yeah, Patagonia. Isn't that where the giants are? There were some kind of legend of giants there.
Probably. I mean, I think that those are around the world. Has it come up yet?
Yes, I see it. Thank you.
Right. So, I mean, you could see here, it looks like the mountain, here's the top of the mountain, and it used to be down here, and it just suddenly, whoop.
Yeah.
Up. That's not going to be caused by, because there's no way for you to provide for a differential in pressure over to just this little bit over here. Why wouldn't you have the same thing on the other side of this rock? And the claim that it's glacial, this is clearly not glacial. So, it's very strange the way the mainstream chooses to support and not support. It's usually, when you look into it, and I was talking about this with Gareth, see the pattern, it often comes down to some, what do you call, crackpot theory, pet theory of one person who happens to already have a 10-year professorship. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, colleges are a social environment. So when your geology professor who teaches Geo 302 and you teach Geo 201, when you're sitting around the lunch and someone says the crack, you just kind of nod and you sip your coffee and you go about your work and you don't see that guy for another 6 months or whatever. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon he's published a paper about it, and then he's got some students convinced, and then after 20 years of doing that, he's got a little bit of a following, and you're not paying any mind because you're over here doing your
right
geology, mineralogy, or whatever. And then pretty soon he's got some crazy theory. This is, an unchallenged theory too, like the Oort cloud. The dirty snowballs. This is not real science. It's just that person had an esteemed position and they went unchallenged for a long period of time. In other cases, a certain professor will some Schlesinger or something like that. They'll make a statement, and then they'll make the mistake of actually promoting it and marketing it, and immediately receive challenge. So I was just watching this great channel, Kathy does physics and history or something like that.
Yeah.
And she was talking about Ohm's law. And when Ohm first came out with his paper, he had this complex mathematics, he had rigorous science and repeated science experimentation. And some jackamole named Pohl, Pohl, hated him so bad about it, probably because he was jealous, that he actually convinced the German Minister of Education to fire Ohm. And Ohm was without a job as a professor for like a decade or so.
Great.
And this is Ohm of Ohm's law, okay? V equals IR. Yeah. And this story gets repeated over and over. In fact, I think it'd be worth someone out there producing a list. I would author with you and put it up academia.
Here's the key, Ramon. Here's the key. Schools don't teach people how to think. They teach them what to think.
Well, that's true.
That's the problem.
Well, yeah, that is absolutely true. That happens a lot. I would say also it's just human nature to create rivals and try and ruin them. However, in science, we're supposed to be above that, and Ohm should have never had that happen just because he had done an experiment. Now, it turned out that part of the problem, too, is that Ampere had mistakenly thought that current was separate from voltage. And that's just a function of what happened because of his high-resistance batteries that they were using too early. So it's another lesson, right? Just because you have early experimentation and it doesn't, produce the same results does not mean that you have definitive results. Mm-hmm. And so the scientific community, it took over 20 years. It wasn't until 1841 when he put this out in 1820. It took till 1841 for the Royal Society to acknowledge him. So
they're good for that.
He had a lot of years of slim eating because he couldn't get a professorship, all on account of somebody who took it personal. And they made it personal. And that's a really unfortunate thing about truth. And it's not likely to change anytime soon unless we teach the AI to be scientists. But, it's just going to be pettiness.
They're going to have to program in the bias.
Yeah, that's probably what to do. Or they'll start reading the science papers and find the bias. The thing is that humans are, science does advance one step at a time, and humans are predictable in that way, which brings us, segue, into why it's going to take so long to conquer the solar system. How do you like that? That was pretty good.
Yeah.
And ideally, it really shouldn't take us a long time to conquer the solar system, but human politics and avarice and greed and failure and how we respond to failure. You take an example. Curious Droid just put out a video not that long ago where he covered what happened with the 3 Mile Island incident. Yeah. And part of the reason why we crushed nuclear so heavily is that 12 days before that incident happened, the movie came out touting the dangers of the nuclear disaster movie. And actually, the actual disaster, if anything, it proved the viability of the engineering and proved how much more effective our engineering check systems were than the Soviet ones at Chernobyl.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I'm not a big proponent of uranium or plutonium nuclear. I'm a fan of thorium. However, it was clearly a bad thing for us to step back and go back towards, coal and natural gas. Lots of nuclear plants have been closed since then. It wasn't a good idea for us to allow nuclear plants in certain places like subduction fault zones, like at Fukushima. But clearly, nuclear is a superior, cleaner system. Now, if you take that nuclear plant and you hook it to an electromagnetic launching system exactly nearby, you can schedule launches to get rid of the waste and send it right into the sun, as far as I'm concerned. So, it's foolish, but it is the state that humanity's in. And that is sort of the issue that I cover in the beginning of the stages of conquest. We have certain biases. We also have a number of things that involve high technical IQs that have nothing at all to do with space. However, are going to be part of what we do. So video games and graphic art, telecom, software design, media and marketing. All of these things are going to be necessary, and yet they have nothing directly to do with spacering. So until we separate the process out into about 5 stages, the first one being a pre-engineering process, then you have an engineering process, manufacturing process, then you have what I would say all the ancillary stuff, selling it to policymakers and making merch and educating and all the things that surround the entire spacer movement. And then finally, of course, the launch and delivery of said technologies to the location. The big issue, and we covered this already, is how much energy are we going to actually be able to tap? And that's the main reason why we need to establish a moon base. We need to practice in proximity to the Earth where it's easy to get help. And we're going to need to see what happens when we try to scale, when in fact the Earth itself is still the voltage source in all source for everything to do with the bases, whether they're moon bases or Mars bases. I'm looking for something. There we go. Okay, when you have here that the source is the Earth, the Moon and Mars become serial loads or drains on our system, on our economic system, on our supply system, our logistics systems. We have to build all those things out in order to make a successful moon base that is an extraterrestrial base. Because ultimately, that's what we're looking for is an extraterrestrial base. And we're looking to create a repeatable system. The Earth's atmosphere and magnetosphere still technically protect the moon a bit. And so, but in general, I would say it is approximating the dangerous environment. You have the hailstone of meteorites, you have radiation and temperature surges, and you have distance from the Earth. So it's not so easy to get a part up there anytime you want. The actual communications lag is not that bad because it's ultimately not that far from the Earth. However, there is a communications lag, so we can get used to that as a species. We can calculate all that things. All those things are built into their systems of how we go to the moon. That's already known. But actually functioning in an environment like that, now scale that up. When you're out at Mars, every minute, every second could count between making the right decision and the wrong decision. And until we have a communications network that scales from here to Jupiter, the question is, how will we get simulating AI to pass important information to astronauts, so-called in the nick of time? Right? If I'm driving down the highway and the Google Drive says, the Google Maps says, there's a speed trap ahead, it does me absolutely no good if I get that message exactly when I cross the cop's path and I get the ticket. It does me zero good. So it's vital that I receive that information a mile or so ahead. And it has to be reliable information. Now, I had a reliable one of those the other day on my West Virginia trip, but I also had an unreliable one that didn't turn out to be true. So the likelihood of us having accurate, precise, and there's a difference between accurate and precise. It's important in engineering, but accurate and precise information in the nick of time or ahead of time to people whose lives literally will be depending on it is going to be pretty poor right now. I mean, let's be honest. It was only like 20 years ago that we burned up a satellite upon entry to Mars because somebody forgot to convert meters to feet or something equivalent. There's some kind of metric to, or I think it was actually the other way around. I think it was from imperial to metric. However it went, it didn't matter. A human made a small mistake and it led to a burn up. So imagine if that's your family visiting a Mars extraterrestrial base and somebody makes
What now? Believe it or not, it's buffering. I never have that problem. Except for tonight. I don't know, it shouldn't be long. 1 second, please.
Satellite upon entry to Mars because somebody forgot to convert meters to feet or something equivalent. There's some kind of metric to, or I think it was actually the other way around. I think it was from imperial to metric. However, it went. It didn't matter. A human made a small mistake and it led to a burn up. So imagine if that's your family visiting a Mars extraterrestrial base and somebody makes.
Yes, well, I was reading, and in a video by Walt Thornhill, he shows a paper that Halton Arp wrote, and the paper is called The Observational Impetus for LaSalle.
Un-effing believable. Of all times to buffer. Okay, bear with me. I'll do what I can.
Well, we're here with Ramon on the Greg J channel. Hello, Ramon. How are you, sir? Yeah, Patagonia, isn't that where the giant...
That's probably what to do. Delivery of said technologies to the location. The big issue, and we covered this already, is how much energy are we going to actually be able to tap? And that's the main reason why we need to establish a moon base. We need to practice in proximity to the Earth where it's easy to get help.
Going with option B. Bear with me for 1 second. We're going to get it going again. I'll just show it from my computer.
And we're going to need to see what happens when we try to scale. When, in fact, the Earth itself is still the voltage source in all source for everything to do with the bases, whether they're moon bases or Mars bases. I'm looking for something. There we go. Okay, when you have here that the source is the Earth, the moon and Mars become serial loads or drains on our system, on our economic system, on our supply system, our logistics system. We have to build all those things out in order to make a successful moon base that is an extraterrestrial base. Because ultimately, that's what we're looking for is an extraterrestrial base. And we're looking to create a repeatable system. The Earth's atmosphere and magnetosphere still technically protect the moon a bit. And so, but in general, I would say it is approximating the dangerous environment. You have the hailstone of meteorites, you have radiation and temperature surges, and you have distance from the Earth. So it's not so easy to get a part up there anytime you want. The actual communications lag is not that bad because it's ultimately not that far from the Earth. However, there is a communications lag, so we can get used to that as a species. We can calculate all that thing. All those things are built into their systems of how we go to the moon. That's already known. But actually functioning in an environment like that, now scale that up. When you're out at Mars, every minute, every second could count between making the right decision and the wrong decision. And until we have a communications network that scales from here to Jupiter, the question is, how will we get simulating AI to pass important information to astronauts, so-called in the nick of time? Right? If I'm driving down the highway and the Google Drive says, the Google Maps says, there's a speed trap ahead, it does me absolutely no good if I get that message exactly when I cross the cop's path and I get the ticket. It does me zero good. So it's vital that I receive that information a mile or so ahead. And it has to be reliable information. Now, I had a reliable one of those the other day on my West Virginia trip, but I also had an unreliable one that didn't turn out to be true. So the likelihood of us having accurate, precise, and there's a difference between accurate and precise. It's important in engineering, but accurate and precise information in the nick of time or ahead of time to people whose lives literally will be depending on it is going to be pretty poor right now. I mean, let's be honest. It was only like 20 years ago that we burned up a satellite upon entry to Mars because somebody forgot to convert meters to feet or something equivalent. There's some kind of metric to, or I think it was actually the other way around. I think it was from imperial to metric. However it went, it didn't matter. A human made a small mistake and it led to a burn up. So imagine if that's your family visiting a Mars extraterrestrial base and somebody makes a small hiccup like that and your family just disintegrates. That's not going to be acceptable. It's just as unacceptable, of course, to have a tourism and space travel industry based around explosive liquid fuel. That's ignorant, yet it's the direction we're going, and that seems to be the current momentum. I don't know how long that trend will last. It might be only another 10 years, and it might be the next 50 to 100 years. That's the problem with determining the rate at which we're actually going to be able to conquer space. However, generally speaking, the entire stages that I've set forth are just based on distance. So you're starting with the moon, then in Mars, then the asteroid belt, terraforming Venus, and the Galilean moons, and harnessing Jupiter, conquering Jupiter, and then getting beyond in stage 6 to moon, extraterrestrial bases, and megacities, Saturn. Of course, here on Earth, we're developing too the whole time. We're developing these, as I discussed before, megaport cities. They are sort of like giant terrariums underneath the water. We're building these underwater cities as we prepare to try and conquer Europa. And then, we finally do conquer out past Saturn. And we start with the actual preparations for interstellar travel, real interstellar travel.
And I think that let's see if we can try and get through all of these before we get into that. So in establishing Moonbase, the main point that I make is that we're going to have a series of needs for stage 1. And when we have differing priorities and available resources, we may achieve those at a differential rate, which unfortunately does not match what space demands we need to do. So it may seem like it's something we need to do. This would be the equivalent of, I have a house, it's a fixer-upper. I want to turn this house into an Airbnb. And so I purchased the house, which is fine. That's the first step. But I immediately install a pool. Well, I don't need a pool to have an Airbnb. However, it seemed to me to be the right thing to do at the time. However, because I did that and I spent $10,000 more dollars, I now don't have the money to fix the copper wiring and plumbing in the house, which I did not know was broken when I first purchased the home. And I stepped through a series of these kinds of problems and discover that the market doesn't care whether or not I have a pool, but it cares only that I have working plumbing. These kinds of things are going to happen to mankind as we enter into space, and no one's really saying that. We have a lot of excitement in the spacer community. We have people design. I think that someone told me there are 10 concurrent designs for forms of space stations, only 2 of which are centrifugal. The rest are some form of floating platforms or something of the like. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe we should approach building space stations in the same way as we do cell phones. However, 10 seems a bit excessive when there are a number of other needs, like the creation of the hauler industry in order to get at these asteroid mines, the development of ways to transfer atmosphere from Venus to Mars for terraforming, the need to build a network for collecting solar charge, for transferring that charge. We're at a stage of development still. We're very infantile, where we took, I think it was almost 20 years to build one James Webb telescope. Then we send it up there and then immediately go, well, it's probably going to get hit by stuff. We should probably build an entire industry that creates these telescopes and be manufacturing hundreds of them. Because I don't know if people realize this. When you zoom in to something, let's say you take one dot. This is what happened. They first thought these were stars. Then the Hubble telescope zoomed in. Turned out that star was actually a very distant galaxy. Well, what that essentially just said is that you just discovered another couple hundred million stars. Okay, now, but when I zoomed in on that galaxy, I excluded more than 99% of the sky around it. And the James Webb telescope is going to enable that even to the max. I think it was 300 times stronger or something like that. So it's going to be pinpointing even more exactly, which means it's going to see less of the sky than the Hubble is. It's going to see it in higher detail. So we're going to have a hard time. They're going to be tasking this thing to the max over the next 12 years or however long it lasts before it gets hit by Russian and Chinese lasers or space junk or something. And they're going to task it to the max to look for stuff. And then when they do, they're going to find more of the examples of the rarities that Gareth talked about, but they're going to ultimately see very little. And under a type of science where you divide and divide and divide, that's not enough because you're trying to build a jigsaw puzzle. So we need actually an entire fleet of these at some distance. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to aim them. There should be one for each one of these planets, recording each surface in the equivalent action of LiDAR that we do on Earth. Of course, to do LiDAR, we put the laser interferometer on the airplane, and then we fly it over the ground. And we get here in Kentucky, we got 5-foot DEM. Some places can get 3 foot. Some can get even less than 3 foot now. However, that's still not perfect resolution. If you want to land on Pluto. It does not do to send to something you think is flat, and then you get there, and there's a giant peak that's 10 feet tall, and there's an angle, and you get there. I don't know if people have kayaked before, but it doesn't take much of an angle to flip a kayak. Well, imagine you have a big top-heavy rocket that's being taught to be a vertical lander, and you get there, and it's been programmed, and then it goes to land, and it just tilts over and falls and explodes. And now it also could be exploding with scientists on it and astronauts. So these are small problems which computing will help us. The problem is that the engineering that goes ahead of it, you don't want to put an automotive or aeronautical engineer in charge of the visioneering for the entire project, the same as you don't want to put a mathematician in charge of the marketing and media for the said airplane or car. And these are much more complicated systems. We're talking about an exponential increase. If an airplane is 2 orders of magnitude more complicated than a car, then this kind of space engineering that we need is going to be five or 7 orders of magnitude more complicated than, or at least large in scope of project than an airplane. It's sort of like the difference between building a mini mall and a chemical refinery. A lot of people may not remember what a chemical refinery looks like. I'll just bring up one here. They're definitely extremely complicated. And that's why chemical engineers are, highly sought out, well paid, and actually in short supply individuals. Now, some of their designs we can reuse over and over again, but as we have fewer chemical engineers, you're going to see the industry start to stagnate a bit. And that's not good, because actually we need to scale our chemical engineering, our materials engineering, our mining engineering, our systems engineering. And then there's a couple of forms of engineering that I actually brought up in the paper that are worth discussing, like preventing pollution and toxic disasters, environmental engineering as it applies to aerospace. I mean, you think about this, all of these things need to be checked by, they can't just be procedurally generated by an AI. That can be done. You can pre-engineer the AI daisy chain to do this work. They now have procedurally generated cities that are for video games. So that can be done. But there's a difference between procedurally generating a city and actually paying $100 million to build a highway framework that is safe for people to drive on, and then to make sure that there's the supply chain there so that you don't run up the budget and go 2 or 3 times over it and then delay it and then cause congestion in that city. So you have to have an engineer hand look over all of this stuff, and they're still going to make mistakes because they're human. So we have to then teach these AI over the next 100 years how to have the eyes of a chemical, electrical, mechanical, civil, mineral, mining engineer with the overreaching view of the systems engineer. You cannot have one guy or gal at NASA who's in charge of overlooking. This is not a Mars rover. You can have one guy. They don't do that, right? They have a whole committee over top of the Mars rover. But you could have one person who theoretically could examine every circuit and every line of code. And it would take them 50 years to do it right and then to sign off on it. And this is probably why the James Webb Telescope took so long, is that they didn't pre-engineer to match the scale of improvement in technology that is between the Hubble and James Webb scope. Plus, there's a bureaucracy involved, the policies, the red tape. All the things naturally come from the people who have no TIQ, or even in the government's case, very low IQ, not understanding how things should work and getting into arguments with lead engineers. Then a lead engineer quits. They go into a rival industry. Now you've got 2 competing government contract companies, and they're suing the government because they deserve the contract. Then one of the companies that was so important for a specific part goes bankrupt. Of course, their work is proprietary and patented. So, negotiations go on to the lawyers. Of course, lawyers, they get paid by the hour. They drag it out. All these kinds of things are exactly the reason why we're going to struggle. The quicker that we pre-engineer and that we grasp the concept that I'm putting out here of pre-engineering and using the AI daisy chain and increasing our calculations, which is a big part of the part 3 of this paper, the faster that we are going to identify the jigsaw puzzle pieces, which are the known bottlenecks and choke points of the entire thing. This is the science called operations research. Unfortunately, and I hope that some of the listeners are paying attention, because it's big money. It's sort of like nuclear medicine. It's big money and nobody's heard of it. There is big money to be made in operations research, but there's hardly anybody doing it. There's a whole lot of people calling themselves data scientists, but are they really designing machine materials? Nope. Yep. Hold on a second. Not sure if I lost the...
Operations research to me basically is how can I take what I have and maximize it?
Well, I mean, yes, but there's also the efficiencies. There's it's sort of like a lot of people have heard of Gantt charts for project management, but Gantt charts have been proven to actually be the best way to go about project management because they don't identify the quickest method to the next point. Okay, so in the need for stage 1, I've listed a series of. This is not an exhaustive list, right? This is a science fiction paper. I have put out there what I think are things that we're going to need, and then the foundations that we're going to need to lay in stage 1 for stage 2. The quicker that we go through the first, second, and third phases of stage 1, and that we adopt to the rules of space and not what we imagine, like Star Wars. I mean, you realize that we have really fantastic science fiction. There's beautiful stuff like heavy metal. Okay,
beautiful movie. Beautiful movie.
Oh, beautiful. How's it open though? It opens with an astronaut getting in a car, and he falls to Earth, and then he lands and he drives up to a house, right?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies.
But that movie directly influenced Elon Musk's desire to put a car into space.
Oh, jeez.
So we're screwing around.
Silly.
I mean, that's
just silly.
It's silly as hell.
Pollute space up some more because you can. You're a billionaire. They just named him the richest man in the world, by the way.
I would say it's more a matter of play. When a child first discovers certain things like fart noises from the under armpit, of course they're going to do that until it drives everyone crazy.
Musk made 120 billion during the lockdown, COVID lockdown.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, he might have also just increased his debts by 160 billion. So the thing is that we're going to play around until nature slaps us in the face.
Oh, absolutely, dude.
Then we will realize this is like the age of exploration, but harder. And the difference being, we can't have ships with cannons and mutinies and all the things that we had in the age of swashbuckling just because George Lucas loved it and put it in Star Wars. We can't actually do it that way. Nature will tell us no. She will spank us.
We keep freaking just destroying the atmosphere. If we lose any more oxygen, we're not going to be around.
Well, we've got plenty of oxygen. It's carbon that we're low on. And contrary to what the audience believes, the pollution's not good, but it's a good thing that we're putting carbon into the atmosphere because we were running out. We were down to 0.03%.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Lots of oxygen. Yeah, we have lots of. Yes, if you took all of the atmosphere and you made it into a football field of length, our carbon would be the final inch of the final yard.
Isn't it amazing how ozone doesn't mix with oxygen, but yet they both inhabit the air at the same time?
Well, they're both made of oxygen.
Well, ozone is a compound.
Right, but its main component is O3. So it's wanting to combine with hydrogen to make water.
Okay.
But we have lots of oxygen, and probably the planet is manufacturing oxygen faster than it's manufacturing carbon dioxide. More than likely.
Yeah. So much for a greenhouse.
At this point, at this point, we're making plenty of carbon dioxide to have carbon. But here's the thing: is we're going to run out of that carbon. We're going to need to actually extract carbon. That's not going to be politically possible until we are through the period of insanity that we're currently in.
So planting more trees. Planting more trees is not the answer.
Well, that would take carbon out of the atmosphere.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, so it's not the answer.
That's not going to work. But I mean, we do need more trees in order to clean the air because of the way we pollute.
I read
we actually have more. A lot of people don't know this. We have more trees now than we used to have because when we clear cut, nature adds many trees in the same area that an old growth tree would have been there. Old growth trees lock up a lot of carbon and then they take up a lot of space, whereas new growth is lots and lots of trees.
I read that we get 80% of our oxygen from sea plants.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I make an argument. One of the first things is when I talk about fixing the technology, there's little things that we haven't done. For example, we don't have perfect control of magnetism. You can see here in this transformer, there's a red arrow I'm pointing to, magnetic field losses. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not a big deal in this transformer. However, the kind of heat that generates over time, that's a big deal in a high-functioning spaceship that you want it to go 20% the speed of light. That's a big freaking deal. And this is a well-engineered transformer. I can tell you, looking at it, this is a high-class commercial grade transformer. This is not the one that's out there on your telephone wire, on your telephone pole that will explode. You can't have that kind of transformer because if it'll explode in a 20-year value, can you take it on a 40-year journey? And I have witnessed these things exploding before. They are bombs because they're full of oil. Okay, so we don't have perfect control of magnetism. We have certain technologies that we can make very strong fields. Now we can shake the field. We just don't have the
It would be more advantageous actually to send androids to another star system over humans. Biological function, yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
By the time we get to stage 10, probably live birth humans will be not pets, but some kind of protecting class of like a tiger or something.
Yeah.
So the question is, who is really going to do it? But of course, an enlightened and mature society by stage 7 will have looked back at the mistakes that we'll inevitably make between stages 3 and 5, and will take pity on them. Getting a lot of background, please.
What?
I'm getting a lot of background noise, just so you know.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was sorry. I was spraying. I didn't know you could hear it. All right, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Okay, so the kind of society that we're going to have as we go forward will be technologically advanced, but emotionally stunted because of the cataclysms. Probably up through the part where we actually have been terraforming Mars and Venus for a while. So I'm talking post-stage 4. And in that time, well, think about this. Just in the time since the Marshall Plan in the 1940s and 50s, in that time, we have already seen a resurgence of fascism and oligarchical capital elitism. Now, if you take that and you add not just wealth, but you add power, prestige, technological access, we have a huge disparateness right now. I mean, I see homeless people right now, and some of them have access to cell phones, but they certainly don't have access to the kind of like stem cell therapy or jet setting, $100 million yachts. Okay, so we have huge disparate quality of life right now on this planet. Imagine after some of these technologies have been invented, supposing that we get through World War III without blowing everything up. So when you have a situation like that, there are going to be class issues in technological spaces such as port cities. You're going to have the corruption of mega corporations who run hauler industries. So if you have issues between trucking companies now, imagine a trucking company with 100 times the buying power of an actual trucking company, because it goes to space and hauls asteroids, and it takes asteroids and assigns values to portions of those asteroids and licenses them out and sells them on the blockchain. But that company is going to have an inordinate amount of power, and we, for whatever reason, before big tech came along, we didn't bother to push our politicians in the West, let alone in a place like China or Russia, to make it illegal to have these long, basically lifetime terms, that lobbyism is still illegal, corporations are writing laws, and now we're at a stage where the technological advantage positionally of these big tech companies is now greater than that of the senator or congressman or nobleman or president, etc., because they have access to the data to blackmail them or to censor them. I mean, we have a big tech company just canceled a sitting
woman, and they already, of course, famously canceled a former president. When you have that kind of situation, you create the conditions for an unnatural competition between companies, which are smaller than countries, and governments, which governments hate anything that has to do with challenging the authority of government. People get into government because they love telling other people what to do. So a lot of them at the lower level couch it as I like helping people, and that might be true, but they certainly love to tell other people what to do. Now you put that in direct conflict with a corporation who believes it's their right to make money helping other people. And in such a case, now you have something like a megacity, which has a giant port in the center. You think that the politics over building an airport are bad. Just wait till you see, I mean, around here we have that same issue, right? The airport wants to expand. Horse farms say no. Back and forth they go for about 80 years. I mean, the battle over the Lexington airport has been going on for a long, long time. And so you bring that now to a giant spaceport, it's going to be problematic. And I want to emphasize this very, very importantly, because just like the beginning of the chess game usually indicates the outcome of the chess game, so long as both sides play correctly after that, probably if we don't start by playing by the rules of nature and not by the rules of politics and word shaming and canceling and all this other stuff that has nothing at all to do with mathematics, technology, science, engineering, or medicine, then we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot before we've even gotten in the race. And that is a very, very important understanding for for the pre-engineering concept. Another thing that's important is to understand that we have a differential gradient between priority and cost. Okay, there are things that we have a high priority need for, which will not be funded correctly because they are expensive. And there are things that are of a low priority that will get funding because they're huge contracts and they'll be delayed, etc. And we all thought that maybe the Chinese model was better. They could just throw lots of people at it. Now we're seeing the ramifications of accelerated engineering. You have highways collapsing, buildings falling over, dams cracking. Why? Because when you skip the safety check portion of the engineering, things get missed. So we can't do it in some sort of accelerated manner. Now, it may be that a AI machine learning tool can study the operations research and maximize that, but it won't be capable of undoing certain things. For example, if you take a mineral out of the ground and you have an ore, you need to run that ore through a chemical process. That chemical process takes an X amount of time. It needs to be been verified. That takes a Y amount of time. It then needs to be processed in a different way for manufacturing purposes. It might need to be ground up. It might need to be melted. It might need to be turned into cubes and loaded on a truck. It might need to be sold on a commodities market, and it's left in a big giant shipyard rusting away until it's purchased. Either way, it's not an efficient process, and that's going to take a Z amount of time. So you have X plus Y plus Z. there is nothing that the AI can do to eliminate that physical restraint of the universe. And then you look at, we're having a supply logistics breakdown because the port of Los Angeles is physically full, and even running at 24 hours a day and being fined for every day that they're late by the White House, it is incapable of emptying itself. The obvious solution to fix this is to have the military come in with Chinooks and Blackhawks and physically lift the containers out and then move them to ports that are inside the middle of the country. But no one's saying that. Well, I don't know why anyone's saying that, but they're just not. They're looking at it going, oh, man, this port issue is an issue. Well, it's full, so let's send this material. Some of the ships were so frustrated with money they were losing, they just dumped the cargo into the ocean. But then they're like, let's send these ships down through the Panama Canal. Well, it turns out the Panama Canal is old, and it's not. They're going to build new canals, but they're going to have that canal in a very soon manner. Same thing with Suez Canal. These are old canals. The ships are much too large generally, so some of these ships are going to have to go around the Horn of South America. And then we're going to bring it up to another port. And that port's already full too. And so when that happens in these complex systems, they start to break down. This goes back to the complexity theory discussions in all the way in Jurassic Park and The Lost World. Of course, Ian Malcolm being the voice from Michael Crichton telling us about these issues. So we're going to have to engineer the physical systems, but we're also going to have to engineer the purchasing and logistics systems. And all of this is going to involve a form of operations research science that has not been done. And I want to make a small plug for people. There is a place that they can learn more. They're on youtube.com. Let's see here. It's the Journal of Operations Research, I think. And they have their own YouTube channel. And we're going to see what kind of numbers here. They have the OR Society here. Okay, the OR Society, let's see how many subscribers they have. Only 4,000 subscribers. So 4,000 people know about operations research out of 8 billion. That's a problem, my friends. That's a real serious logistical problem in a society where a guy puts out a satanic shoe and corporations promote his message, and it gets out to hundreds of millions of people. That's not a wise approach. So we're just not set up right now for success. And on top of that, we're now entering an age where the spacering is becoming a competitive war situation.
I'm going to subscribe to that. I didn't even know it existed. Thanks.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem for research. They just don't have a lot of press.
Yeah.
So we have these things to overcome. You look here at the NASA budget as a share of the U.S. budget. It's only continued to decrease, not increase. That's why we haven't been back to the moon. Is that we're not serious? Period. We're just not serious.
What's keeping us away?
Lesser people. I'll be honest with you. People who think small. People who think small. I've got a paper that I'm going to put out at some point that I'm calling the POS theory, and you know what POS stands for. And my theory is basically predicated on this. Better people build the things, then they get interested in other things, they move on. Lesser individuals who have it in them to abuse others and to use it for their own gain, take over such systems and then drive them into the earth. And that's not
Absolutely.
Good. The internet would be a prime example of that.
Just rape and profit. That's all. They don't care what they have.
And those people, that's all they're interested in. So they never develop technology further. Tesla ran into this with his AC. He could have taken AC electricity and power much further than he did, but they wouldn't let him because lesser-minded individuals drove it into the ground in order to take advantage and exploit it.
Yep.
There's a lot of your audience probably doesn't know this. There's a light bulb that's been burning for 140 years straight.
Yeah, I heard that.
And well, the reason why they don't last that long now is that the light bulb industry physically got together. This is all documented.
Yep.
And determined how they colluded together how to make the light bulb not last.
Right.
So long, and then they determined you would get kicked out and underpriced by all of your competitors if you made a light bulb that lasted too long, that didn't match their industry standards. Now, that is textbook monopoly and collusion. It's illegal, but it was allowed to happen, and it's now since happened, of course, in lots of industries. The government should have quashed it. Of course, these were secret meetings held in the 1800s.
Just really quick, there's a book that I was recently made aware of titled Strategy for Defeat. If you get a chance to check it out, do so, please. It's amazing.
So we have a series of phase one goals that need to happen, of course, in order for us to really, truly terraform on the moon. My favorite of these to discuss is funding the Generation 1 of EM launching system. Now, I was a child when the electromagnetic launching was proposed. I remember it being on the news and on the Discovery Channel. That has been stuck in development for 30 years, just that one project. And it's all still in phase, it's in Gen 1, of course, the software and the engineering, but they change the designs. Every time you change the designs, it's like resetting the project. So the engineering has to sort of start over. Now things are much more complex. The electronics is more complex. If you have more complex electronics and software, you need more engineers. Where are these engineers going to come from? If they're all going into video games and cellular communication and making social media companies that are there to control us and put us into a virtual reality that has nothing to do with what is actually happening. Okay? This is a problem, is what I'm saying. And until we wake up from that disease, it's going to be hard for us to go forward. It could be the equivalent of the Dark Ages before a Martin Luther comes along and nails the edict the challenge to the door of the church. Right? Between now and then, we could have war. We could have a complete virtual world that ruins children's livelihoods. We already have evidence that social media is causing increased amount of suicides, especially in girls, but not only in girls. So the question is, when are we going to measure this with data and act? Well, okay, we can measure it with data. How's that working for pharmaceuticals? Right, it's the same way with tobacco, right? They lit up the science, and wouldn't you know that smoking didn't have anything to do with cancer for a long, long time, like 40 years or something. Okay, if we ask Facebook and their fact checkers who they own, right? They own the fact checkers, and the fact checkers they own the companies the fact checkers are using to check the facts, and then the fact checkers are selling the information to the media company who owns the companies that the fact checkers are using. So it's an incestuous triangle. So long as that exists, and so long as FDA people can go work in the pharmaceutical industry, and you can have the two people in bed with each other when they're doing these deals in the back room and the testing, etc., you are not going to see progress. And it's going to be worse in the aerospace industry if we don't get ahead of it. Because the military-industrial complex, whether it's Chinese, Russian, or American, is well known for that kind of behavior. It's worse. And a lot of technologies can get buried for a long time. There could be already some of these technologies that are existing. My other favorite, of course, because it's my idea, to pre-engineer the dual-layer economics. The reason why we need that dual-layer economics, we need plasma simulated economics, in my opinion, in order to prevent when you have an asteroid come in that's worth $20 trillion. Well, it's not going to be worth $20 trillion anymore because you just destroyed the entire platinum market, and now the platinum is worthless. De Beers figured this out with diamonds, and so while diamonds are incredibly profuse throughout the planet, they're kept rare artificially in order to keep the price high. And we have to do something very similar just to protect our market. So we have to engineer all sorts of new kinds of economics. So there is an entire new field of engineering, economic engineering. Well, what are the kinds of people who are attracted to economic engineering? Are they the most loyal and honest people, or are they usually con men and socialists? Probably that. And if that's going to happen, we're going to have a huge problem with inflation and what I call magic math. And magic math, while it could ostensibly run Enron for a while, in the end, the fraud that becomes contagion. Enron was being run so poorly, and the books were being cooked so poorly that California was having rolling brownouts. So we can't have that kind of thing. And you scale that up with giant government programs and grants and huge contracts, $100 billion contracts just to build, say, highways on the moon. You're going to encounter loads of corruption. Now, we could keep ourselves at more or less the scale we are, but they don't plan to do that, right? They want to cull the population because it's going to peak at 11 billion. They want to cull it back down to like 4 or 5 billion, or even less if you have Bill Gates in charge of the thing. So if you decrease the human momentum, how quickly is this stuff going to get done, even with AI running? Because you cannot just take what the AI does. Anybody that's ever seen Google Earth or programs, video game programs, knows that these AI don't work perfectly. They break. The NPCs suddenly flip out. I was on playing Ghost Recon and I popped an NPC character in the head, and my son and I watched it flip. It looked like it was possessed by the devil. It flipped for about 30 seconds, just up and down, because it couldn't figure out where to land the body because it happened to be next to like a lawn chair or something. And so it just flipped and flipped and flipped. It was hilarious. I wish I could have had it on record. And so if you have something like that doing your engineering, and then somebody rubber stamps it because they've been kind of nudged at, hey, we need this new chip out because this chip is going to go in all the self-driving cars, and these self-driving cars are proof in the pudding for the drones, and the drones are necessary for these mega port cities, for the security, blah, 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 the entire thing. We already have a supply chain logistics problem for the chip manufacturer, and now this guy's rubber stamping. Pretty soon you have the Volkswagen situation where they've been faking the numbers and they have to recall 7 million of them. You can't have that when you have go into space. You cannot have Volkswagen type fraud and Enron type fraud when you go into space. Space will kill the astronauts. And if it kills the astronauts, the media will jump on it because that's what the media loves. They love death and destruction. So they'll jump on it and they'll shame things, and they'll get Karens and Kyles to tweet about it and tell the Congress that the space program is unnecessary and toxic and nuclear and destroy the world. And they'll get some stupid politician to agree to write a law. He or she will make some policy and sell it on Twitter and make them and rub themselves on the back about how great they are because they're protecting everyone from poorly designed space travel. And all it turned out was that some guy rubber stamped chip manufacturing because the software told him it was good. That can't happen. It has to be looked over very, very carefully. When we made Apollo, we had women making individual. People should go to Smarter Every Day.
He has a video about the memory modules of the Apollo rockets. Okay, these memory modules were hand sewn, and they were magnetic rings that flipped back and forth. And they're priceless objects now. Only 14 kilobytes in power, but absolutely vital to the functioning of the Saturn V rocket. And these women, because they had the hand dexterity and the size needed to get in there with the tools, handmade these and checked over them. So we will have to spend a lot of time that people are not thinking about making sure that these are here. Now, NASA and ESA, they have a lot of the pre-flight checks. That's part of what took it so long for the James Webb in the last year. It had to go through all the pre-flight checks. That's going to be scaled up. And it's going to become, when you involve humans, when you involve mothers, pregnant women, old ladies, veterans, people wanting to travel in space, it's not going to be the same as, getting on the airplane And already people don't want to get in the airplane because there's all these crazies, and you see the videos of them on TikTok or whatever. You can't have that. You can't have crazies just getting on. These people are going to have background checks. They're going to have mental health checks. And we cannot really afford anyone to go into some of these space programs like building extraterrestrial bases who has any sort of instability, okay, and any kind of volatile personality. I mean, I probably wouldn't even qualify myself because I'm a fairly volatile individual, right? And you can't have that kind of thing. I have a high IQ, but my EQ is only 100. We're going to have and how many people have a high TIQ, a high IQ, and a high EQ going into space? So we're going to have to design entire educational systems that increase these numbers. And they can be increased if you start young enough. So there's some fine points I mentioned. I'm not going to bother going through those. Do you guys have any questions before I go to the states too?
Well, let me ask you this. In today's standards, do you find science ahead of where it should be, behind where it should be, or right about at the right place?
No, we're behind where we should be.
Yes, sadly. Yes.
Yes, and it's a mentality issue. It's a paradigm. It's the belief in settled science, and it's a belief in the authority fallacy. There's a lot of apples and oranges fallacies as well, and there's a whole lot of non sequitur. And when I mean non sequitur, I mean even little things, like to do with COVID. Beliefs that the average individual who is able to attend college, and they may start at community college or technical college and then go on and become an engineer and get their master's, and they're handheld through the system. Okay. But the bottom line is, okay, I graduated magna cum laude at UK. That ain't fit at MIT. Okay? If I was to go through an MIT, and I'm going to tell you something.
A bigger pool.
The standards, no, it's a smaller pool. It's a tighter pool. It's a harder pool.
Oh, I see.
Standards at these Ivy League schools has dropped compared to the old days. All right, their actual standards.
They actually have to make it so that minorities can pass, right?
Yeah, but it's not only that. It's because they're focused on things that aren't sciences.
Yeah, well, no doubt, of course.
These non-technical so-called sciences that have now been added into the curriculum. Mm-hmm. That's why an aerospace university and any space colleges and related ancillary colleges that are proposed to go in that aerospace university cannot afford to lower their standards for any reason whatsoever. Race, color, creed, religion. The day is Tuesday. We have a shortage, so we'll bring you in. I mean, the thing is, there's not much difference between somebody with a TIQ of 130 and 129. But
they're loyal to their paradigm.
Well, okay, yeah, but we're talking TIQ here. There's no meaning to paradigms, and when you talk about TIQ, the person either knows how to write code and build mechanical products, or they don't know how. And it has nothing to do with their color or creed or anything.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? It just has to do with can they do it.
Uh-huh.
No matter what Werner von Braun believed, the man could flat out make rockets.
Yeah.
That's why they brought him in. Now, was it the right idea, the wrong idea? I mean, he denied being into the Nazis and all that kind of stuff. I have no idea. But clearly, at some point, we brought in Nazis who infiltrated everything.
He was a Nazi.
Or because racism is part of the biology, maybe it was inevitable that Nazis and commies and socialists would try and take over our republic and the West in general. That's probably also true. Yep. However, the fact that we're letting them win is the part that's disturbing, because space will not care if you like Che Guevara. Space will only care is whether or not you can feed your people in space. Mm-hmm. And even then, it probably is going to want to kill you. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's trying to. There's not much reason for you to stay alive in space. There's only the number of reasons, and there'll be a finite number of checklisted reasons why you're alive still. And it'll be a finite number. It'll be less than 1,000 reasons why you're still alive. and a huge percentage of them is going to be shields, a working water filtration system, a backup oxygen supply, and heat protection for when you go through the atmosphere. That's a huge percentage. Then there's, do the people get along when they're in space? You can't go on a long journey all the way to Proxima Centauri, at 10% the speed of light, and find out that you onboarded a psychotic despot, or somebody whose genes is likely to produce a psychotic despot in 3 generations, which is also a possible thing. So we have a long ways to go before we could get to that stage, and we have a lot of development that we can do on Mars, on Venus, and all the moons, and then the planets. As far as terraforming, go ahead.
Come on. All I'll say is, when you go through what you're saying, you're going to end up with a total mono system, and it'll totally break down eventually anyway, just the same as if you've got someone that in 3 generation time creates a despot, and that despot's got to be knocked on the head.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's going to break down over.
You can't say, I'm going to create laws, because the problem with that is, how do you adapt and change them? This is one of the big things I see. If you're going to go into space, you said the right thing. It will be about how do you produce what you require to survive. The moment in our cultures, we have plentiful supply of food. But, it isn't that far back in history that we didn't. And that's possibly only just around the corner where we can be back in that position again.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
yeah. All because of poor engineering in the late 1800s.
Yeah. So when you talk about it, it always comes back to your monetary system and the system that you have in place of how honest do we want to be with what we're doing.
Yeah, and also the paradigm with which you engineer and pre-engineer, because if the paradigm that you engineer and pre-engineer has a lot of confirmation bias and a priori fallacy, then you can usually get away with something for a while. For example, our sewage system that we currently use on Earth, we don't even have it to everybody. Half of the children in India are exposed to fecal oral contamination. It actually is shortening their lives by an average of 10 years. Okay, and that is the old plumbing system that we in the West are already looking at it going, oh my God, what are we going to do to replace this? There's lead in the pipes, and there's chemicals flowing everywhere, and we can't even clean out all these pharmaceuticals and hormones. We're ruining the testosterone levels. We're killing all the amphibians and the fish. And we just turn our heads. We don't know what to do. We can't even get rid of asphalt, and asphalt is destroying the environment. So these kinds of fallacies and problems that we create, even when they're low tech, they have high tech problems, because the asphalt industry got going, and now the asphalt industry is actually quite complex now, and yet we shouldn't be using asphalt. Period. We shouldn't be using asphalt.
So we're going to take all that thinking and that with us potentially into the next space, into the next place.
Yes, we're going to take it right into the moon, and the moon's going to punch us in the face.
Yes.
A lot.
So,
it's going to punch us in the face a lot.
And the problem is, when we go taking that to these other places, we also run the risk that it will come back and punch the people that are left here even harder.
It very well could, because the load is dependent on the source, isn't it? And so the source is being affected by the load.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
right.
So I say, I've listened, like I say, I've listened to a lot of them speaking recently, Elon Musk and that, on space and doing it. And I just think, gee, we've got a long, probably the easiest part is going to be getting there.
Yeah, getting there is not a problem. We ran there, planted a flag, and quickly beat retreat. I mean, it was like capture the flag. It was more like sneaking a kiss at the end of the first date than it was actually getting there.
Yeah, and
we didn't really get to first base. We stole the kiss.
Yeah, and I'm sure you will agree that a lot of people that ultimately, if we achieve that and go there, the people that will be the inhabitants won't be the convicts, like built countries like you're in and I'm in. It will be the rich who can afford it, not necessarily the people that can put their into doing it.
that's the unfortunate thing, because of course those people are not tough.
You'll be putting these groups there, so they will then need some form of slave to do the work for them. So you come down to,
but it won't. That won't work, because they have to be tough. So they have to be more like Carnegie or the original Rockefeller. You know, they have to be mentally, physically tough. Or J. Paul Getty. J. Paul Getty was a roughneck.
Yeah, so you're going to have to be totally devoted. And you've got to think those names you just mentioned, they weren't people that had silver spoons in their mouths.
Or Greg J.
Nope, not originally. Not originally.
No, you know, the next generation did. But, you know, so when you go back through, you've got to have all the people that made the big advances. They're often made in the equivalent of your back shed.
Yeah, we're going to have to be tough. I mean, the San Diego Chargers don't win the Super Bowl for a reason, folks. They're not tough. And it's going to be very difficult. We're going to have to practice on Antarctica. Right now, Antarctica is a political shitstorm, to be honest with you. The ability to actually go to Antarctica and do the kind of research that we're talking about, people would have an absolute cow. Protecting the penguin or the territorialism. China would pay the media to print a bunch of stories about the white supremacy of the United States and the neo-colonialism. Meanwhile, they're actually de facto establishing colonies in Africa. And the question is, what is the way through that nightmare? It's to continue to develop and to be punched in the face and never give up, just like Thomas Edison.
That's me.
And at the moment, you come situation that we have in the moment, whereby we're being, I suppose I call it, regulated out of that.
Well, I think that's a huge issue, is that we are being regulated. You're right. We don't need laws. We do need smart policies for these companies to enact and to hold themselves accountable to this form of thinking. Of course, executives are not engineers, and they're not even visionaries. Very few executives right now have even a spine to say no to the Twitter mob, let alone the ability to tell a bunch of engineers you have pie-in-the-sky ideas that might get people killed. And they themselves are not willing to stand up, so they just say, yeah, that's a great idea, and they run off to the stock market, and they raise a bunch of money, and lo and behold, they were lying. And that is an electric vehicle truck. That electric vehicle, $35 billion for a fake electrical vehicle truck. There's actually not electrical vehicle at all. So there's all sorts of fraud. And these frauds are getting away with it because of the lack of engineering of social systems, because the social systems either were just naturally emergent processes, or they were monkeyed around with by academics and philosophers who had no data, people like Karl Marx. We have the data now. 100 years are in. Sorry, communism, socialism fail. You're out. Well, unfortunately, not out, because a lot of people don't know the history, and they don't understand why it failed for 100 years. There's a Wikipedia page on all the failures. You can read the list of 100 years of between 1919 and 2019, all of the countries that have had socialist and communist countries that have failed, governments that have failed. But yet we keep going. And in fact, China is building a military base, guys. China's building a military base in Cuba. And Russia is talking to Venezuela. So it's not over. And this is what I've talked about in the new Cold War. These are the things that stop us from progressing. Now, one of my solutions for when we get through the finer points of phase of stage one is that we can pre-engineer a better middle class and suburban home that is a spacer. It's in the direction of spacer societies, and that will help us with computing power, with decentralization, protecting democracy from the fascists, with increasing the amount of self-reliance and resiliency on the planet. So, forms.
I have to interject a piece of food for thought. In the late 70s and early 80s, America was the leader in the world of making basically everything. That's all gone now. thanks to our politicians.
Of true green energy like algae solar and having cryptocurrency arrays down below. Cryptocurrency is a good example of the problem I'm talking about. Right? It's an emergent.
We live on planet stupid.
We do live on planet stupid. I understand that. I was praying about it tonight. But cryptocurrency was developed by smart people, and now all the governments of the world are trying to crack it down. Why? Because it challenges their power, and they don't understand it. These people don't understand it. I've had bankers on my table that don't understand it, and it's money. It's the ability for you and me to make money, literally make money. Well, that takes away the power of the Federal Reserve. They don't like that. They don't know how to control it, though, because it was purposely designed to get around that, because there's an emergent process that came out of it. Was an idea that had already pre-existed, and this is a video covered by Cold Fusion, and it finally came of age because of the mortgage meltdown. All right, but if we put in homes all these mining apparatus, then we could do calculations for space, and each one could also have backup generator, computers, aquaponics, and medical bays for each of the homes. So this is a stage 2, mid stage 1 to stage 2 future home. We are entering the mid-stage 1, but it could take a while because these home builders are going to keep building homes as cheap as possible. They don't care if they blow apart in the first gust of wind, but they don't have much incentive to build a really nice home. We're going to have to create policies that actually force them to do that.
There's a lot of bankers. The bankers.
Well,
the bankers.
Good luck with that. There's your prime cartel.
You talk about your corporations. At the end of the day, your corporations are all run by bankers. So no matter how good an idea an engineer has, if the bankers don't see how they can convert it quickly to cash, not going to touch it.
Right.
And it's the same with cryptos. Cryptos really at the moment are worthless unless you can convert them to cash. Because
and that's the way they want it.
I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to sell you my car and take your cryptos. Right?
Right.
I want you to you cash the cryptos and give me cash. Now I can go then and convert them back to cryptos. But at the end of it, the way it is at the moment, one day it's worth this, one day it's worth that. But we know our cash is
that's true.
We know our cash is up and down like a yo-yo too. But because you can hold it in your hand, it physically feels like what's written on it, which you have a mental view of what $10 means.
Right. I agree.
Yep.
Okay, so we have here just a list of various technologies for the basically redeployable infrastructure. Folding domes and fusion generations, crawler platforms, landing pads. All this stuff needs to be deployable and redeployable. So it needs to unfold, and then even in some cases, some of these structures will be so large, they'll need to construct themselves, and the robots that come with it will need to automatically put this all together. Well, okay, let's take for example, we need a fusion generation station on the Mars or on Moon, because here we're talking about Mars, right? That we'll need to send heavy equipment to clear off a pad. So we'll have to have something land there first. It'll need to clear a place for this to happen. Then it'll need to have heavy equipment that compacts the soil, lays the concrete. Well, where's the concrete come from? Well, if Mars doesn't have the concrete materials, we're going to have to ship it there. So we're going to have to EM launch that stuff. We can't use rocket fuel for all this stuff. That's crazy. It's crazyville. Right? And to have the electricity, of course, we have to have true green energy on huge scales here on Earth, or then on the Moon. So then we send it all to Mars. Well, it needs to be able to put itself together, including something we'll need to construct the cranes. Well, how do we construct giant cranes on Earth? We use other cranes. So it's not an easy, even the smallest of these issues can be a huge thing. An engineer will agonize over the shape of the seats on the first commercial flights. They might take 3 months as a human to do that. Okay, now we could theoretically just look into some really nice car, some supercar that's been built that is highly engineered, and they have those now. I mean, there's some supercars that have been built, prototypes, of course,
I'm going to break
that are so highly engineered they look like they're ready to go to space. And we could maybe use some of those things, but in reality, some new young engineer will spend an agonized time on those seats and all the seat heaters, and they will argue with other engineers about the amount of electricity that they should be. See, we can't have that. The AI, the targeted AI and the functional specific AI will have to tell the AI pre-engineering programs how much electricity they're allowed to have, and then it'll come up with a seat based on an array of procedurally generated seat designs, and then a human will look it over and then go, you know what, I think based on these different numbers of bodies and the data that we have, this seat is probably best for the average. And we've gotten pretty good at that. I mean, look at the Cadillac car company. They're pretty good at designing seats. And then we'll have to make some, and somebody will have to sit on. I mean, all these little processes could take forever. And we're talking about really large facilities, really large structures to terraform Mars. And a lot of them, not one or two, because that would take forever. We have to build it to scale, which means we need scaled energy sources, which means we need scaled mining sources, which goes back to the deep volcanic mining that we covered in the part one. And all of these things are going to take massive amounts of resources, including dollars or whatever the currency is. And we have to have also a good reason to go. So here's the Elon Musk, Tesla, and space thing. We don't need this kind of juvenile behavior. Okay, we just really can't afford to approach space with a billionaire's playboy mentality. We also have to get rid of and deal with our issues in terms of cataclysms. This is from the movie Rogue One. And here we see the Death Star destroying Jeddah. So once again, we made Venus, and then Venus made the cosmic pole, and there's a giant crest, and the pole came down. And by the way, it had different pulses, different beams, right? That's part of the cultural myth too. That's part of the memory. We've got the Chinese examples of this, where different pulses are along the pole, and then it blows up an entire city. Okay, well, this kind of stuff is going to hold us back mentally from going to Mars. It's going to be intimidating, let's say, to really truly terraform Mars. First of all, Mars is a hero, and Mars is, of course, a place that we love. We're interested in Mars. We're disappointed in him that he doesn't have life and water on him, but we're just tickled pink to go there. And the truth is that Mars doesn't love us back. It is a dangerous, dangerous world. The radiation, the temperature swings, the fact that all the water is clustered up in the north and it's going to be jagged. So we're not going to be capable of just launching maybe with some parachuting or something. But even if we can land directly on the pole, we're going to have a deployable system. That deployable system will then have to set up a launching system that takes the water and launches it to the areas of Mars that we need it to be at. And we don't even know if this water, if it's melted, would stay on the surface of Mars. It may just soak right through the ground and then go through some kind of bedrock system and end up somewhere else. Right? I mean, theoretically, according to them, the planet was covered in Mars. Well, where did it all go? The planet was covered in water. Where did it all go? Of course, I tell you that Venus took a lot of the atmosphere and such. Maybe it took the water too. I don't know, but I don't think it had much water to begin with. And so there's really no data as to how well the bedrock there is going to support having a lake or something that we want to have. In our mentality, we believe in these mega domes. I would say that for sure, we are going to need to have living systems and cities that protect humans for a long time. We're not going to have suits and exosuits and space vehicles that are capable of really keeping us alive, like in the movie The Martian, for enough time that it would be worth our while and worth creating the mega contracts to just go ahead and build these mega cities. If we build them here on Earth, it's going to be helpful to us when we get to Mars. In stage 3, I talk about utilizing asteroids, getting the minerals and the materials. That's probably going to be a greedy shit show. It's going to be a bit of a football game or a rugby game, more or less. There's going to be a lot of scrum, and that may inhibit our early successes in streamlining the logistics operations. Again, probably going to depend on the AI daisy chain. I don't pretend to know it all there. When we get to stage 4, when we are terraforming Venus, we are going to definitely need to use. We're going to need to use the Venus's atmosphere to supply carbon dioxide to Mars to grow forests on Mars. Yet there's extra atmosphere on Venus. It's like 20 Earthen atmospheres. So we'll have other uses that we'll be able to take advantage. However, my main goal here is for us to use a powerless atmosphere collection system that uses gravity slingshotting to move. And the good news is we'll have to produce so many of these gravity slingshot devices. Of course, some of them will be killed off by attrition and mistakes. And, if we have a fleet of 100,000 of them, we probably need more of a fleet, like 100 million of them, to be efficient. They need to be, of course, scalable and controlled and capable of being terminated and sent into the sun or whatever we want to do with them. Maybe we get really wise and we design them in a way that they can be repurposed or land like drones on and do probing on Venus. I have no idea. Or maybe they just start smartly moving atmosphere from Venus to Europa. That would be pretty smart. No matter what, they need to not use liquid rocket fuel. That's the one thing that's definitely clear. Because otherwise, we're just going to continue to drain the Earth. And we need that oil. I make the point also in this that Venus probably should be terraformed in a way that it respects the feminine, because Mars is almost certainly going to be glass and steel and masculine and martial and all these things. It's going to be controversial. The moon's probably going to be the same way. It seems only fair to me that we treat Venus with regard for the feminine, which we are losing rapidly in this society. I mean, we're now at the age of the Enlightenment where we are allowing men to physically beat women, physically beat them, not just beat them metaphorically in a race, but physically beat them and break their cheekbones in combat sports. This is a sign of course, mental illness in our society. That is not going to work when we get into space, because quickly we're going to have a situation where the Earth is acting as a battery, and there's 3 loads now in parallel, and they're going to be competing. Mars and the moon are going to be still demanding a huge amount of the Earth's resources and time and energy and babies. I mean, by then, some single mom with like 4 babies and the dad skipped out or he died in some war or killed by the space cops or whatever. That mom may want to migrate from the Earth where she had it tough. She might want to migrate to Mars because she picked up a job as a hauler, cleaning lady or something like that. I have no idea. I don't know the individual circumstances, but for whatever reason, she needs to have safe transport, and she needs to have a place to go. And that is going to be a complex system, much more complex in logistics and need than what we currently have. And what we currently have isn't even good enough to make sure and ensure that the continents of South America and Africa, and all of the islands and large portions of Asia are well clothed and housed and fed, even though we can produce that food and housing and clothing and electricity. So we have human fallibilities that the West is blind to because we've had it so good for so long. And we quickly need for these individual resistor loads to become their own sources. And that's not going to happen overnight, and it probably is going to result in some types of war. I would assume also somewhere along this lines, because of these resistances in the circuit, we're probably going to have megacity battles. These megacity battles could be frighteningly nuclear or some other superweapon. In such a case, we need the AI at this point to be smart enough to more or less control the punishment and discipline in an economic way to keep these wars from escalating. You can't have a mega Paris number 2 making war with mega, London number 2 on account of misshipments of a rare fuel rod that then causes the death of New France on Mars because all the people didn't have enough electricity to circulate air through the recyclers. And because there was a problem between New Spain and New France, one didn't help the other. And so the colony had a max exodus, and then that caused the individual stock market associated with that system to collapse, which is enough reason to go to war in the first place. People have gone to war for far less. Brothers have killed each other over remote controls for the television. So how will humans respond when they can't get oxygen in space, right? Or water when they should? These are problems that we've never dealt with before, and we don't know anything about until we go through it as a species. When we get to colonizing the Galilean moons and harnessing the power of Jupiter, actually, let me ask, are there any questions so far?
Okay, we're going to break, and I'm going to come out and see you here in a second. And try to answer any questions. First, I'm going to go over to Discord. In case anyone that is concerned or interested wants to join me, I'm going to be in the Great Hall. And you're invited if you wish for a little break here. Oops, I got to turn on my headphones just a minute. Okay. All right. Just another second here. Get you on the screen. Yeah, it's so time consuming. And live right here. Okay, I got you there. We're almost done. So, how is everybody doing so far? Ramon does get intricate and deep, doesn't he? That's what I like about him.
Electric_AJ said, Greg, what was the book you mentioned in the stream? Greg J.
Strategy for Defeat. I learned about it through a man named L. Fletcher Prouty. I have a video with him on it talking about the JFK assassination, but he gets deeper and he goes back to World War II when things started to go a little sideways. Mostly because we had statesmen who were conducting their own foreign policy. And many times it was...
Electric underscore AJ said strategy of defeat.
Yes, strategy of defeat. Dan the Tube Man, the day the 99% refused to use and be used by money, all the manipulation, you know...
Electric underscore AJ said THX.
I think that we're all getting wise now to the game that's being played, and it has been being played. It's, like I said, my new mantra is, may the farce be with you. Because it's all farce. I might even get a t-shirt with that on it. I mean, everything has a cover story, and it is a farce. It's just so disillusioning. But I suppose that's better than living with the illusion. Alex Builds, hello. Ancient history criticism is always good to see, sir. And who else? We got Alex Builds in ancient history, like I mentioned. You guys have been having a pretty intricate chat. That's cool. That's good. I like that. Dan the Tube Man, rocking out. I like the picture. It's cool. Randy Garcia, always good to see you, Randy. You guys are solid. I had a really good core, really good group. Donald Wages, how you doing, Donald? Nick Cartside, come and see me at Deuce. I miss you, man. We need to chat. I miss your wit. Jasper Newcomb, it's good to see you, Jasper. It's been a little bit, hasn't it? And Nick. Nathan, that was me. I'm using my son's phone. Reese Rose, Ray Carr, and okay, we got Grouch was here, Shannon, William Collins, Shockwave. All right, man. Seems a bit loopy to me. What was he talking about? Yeah, he's been a stranger lately. Brandy, good to see you, Brandy. I hope you're still here. All right, guys, I'll stop wasting time. What we're going to do, we're going to show the rest of it. And then I'm going to play a little bit of music from subscribers who have sent me their music. A few songs. And then we're going to get into an audio that I've been working on. Some stuff that's been going on in space and things like that. So, yeah, our night has just begun. Hang in there with me, and we got 50 more minutes to go with Ramon. I'm trying to keep it interesting by changing the pictures when he's not scrolling. So, I just have to play that by ear. All right.
Or about the stages 1 through 4.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, Ramon, you there?
Yeah.
Ramon, you there? Well, from what you've just said, realistically, the only reason you'd go to Mars at the moment is to work out how to mine it, not to put a civilization there. Why would you spend all that resources and energy on going to potentially a hostile environment? Why wouldn't you just build your own environment somewhere in space? And then
that's not a bad idea per se.
I can then say there's a meteorite in the area, it's got this in it. Yeah, we can use that, or we can trade that. Let's go and mine that out of it.
I'm going to tell you why. Because we won't be satisfied until we do. And we want to go to other stars and other planets, and we need the practice. And we need the maturity.
Yes, but I don't need to go there to live there. I only need to go there to get something, what I might need, and then move on to the next one.
You and I don't, but the people in the future are not going to think the same way.
No. Well, they might. Why would I want to go and potentially build myself that I have to live always in this hostile environment when I could engineer an environment to live in that is quite good?
Well, no, I agree with you.
Go there just to get what we required from it when we require it, and then move on to the next one.
I agree with you as an engineer.
A bit like the explorers were 300 years ago when they were doing that on Earth, because Earth then was a big place. To you and me now, Earth is only a little tiny place. That's why we want to go.
You got to understand that only sailors like to live on ships. Everyone else, including ex-felons and religious persecuted people who want to flee centralized power, all those people, they want land. They want something to put their feet on. And I don't reckon that's going to go away. And for low IQ, low TIQ people to get there, it's going to take the rest of the spacer community to build that. Because the low IQ family has every right to enjoy a new prospect on Venus or Mars or even the moon, even though the moon's nearby. They want to visit. They want to be able to visit grandma. You know, we might choose to live near our parents so that our children can visit the grandparents and learn to drive. And they might just take to the moon and say, this is far enough. Boy, I'd never go to Mars. Woo, what a hellscape that is. But they certainly want to live on New York because New York has the newest art scene. And why does New York have that? Because there's all these tech companies that moved there for the research. And why did they go there? Because, we're circumnavigating the globe. Not easy. Not easy being an explorer. Right. So in conquering the
Rouch said, "Are you
Galilean
lagging?"
moons and harnessing the power of Jupiter itself, literally the power, we kind of have to understand the difference of scale here in accomplishing our Birkeland polyphase superweb. When we look at the Earth's main grid, we're talking 22,000 miles in radius, and the Mars space exploration is 13,000 miles in radius on average. And I provide the spreadsheet for those down here. You can click on it and open up the spreadsheet and learn all about it. This is, billions of square miles and trillions of cubic miles in volume. When we're talking about the Birkeland polyphase superweb, just at version 1, getting out to the Jupiter region, it's now getting into the trillions of square miles, hundreds of trillions of square miles, too. And so that's like 5 orders of magnitude. And then into the sextillions of cubic miles in volume, because you have a 399 million mile radius. And that version 1 is from Mercury to Jupiter, not all the way to the sun. So what are we going to do? We're going to have to produce satellites for an overall increase in at least area, if we're going to say the ecliptic, of this percentage here. So what is that? They have a comma here, comma here, comma here. Here. That's like it's like a 3 trillion% increase in area just to get to version 1. And then each stage of the versions of the superweb after that, where we actually get to the size that we need to collect the energy we need to have the railgun launchers to send mega cruisers through space at 40% the speed of light so that we can reasonably reach Alpha Centauri or Proxima Centauri or Gliese. Those kinds of increases will be only marginal, but it's that first hump that is going to be hard. But that's the good news, is that it's like Henry Ford when he first started making cars. Nobody had a car except for the rich people. So he's got an infinite market, it seemed to him. And that's legendary status. So anybody that wants to build these satellites that are going to be modular, redeformable, upgradable with newer computer components. So you have to use, motherboard shapes and attaching screws and make it easy for little hexapod. I mean, Aaron, my cohort here, he's designing a drone for space, basically, that has like 6 legs. This thing needs to be able to reach into the computers and do mechanical repairs, all this stuff on the fly in space, launched because the satellite sent a small alert. 8 minutes later, it arrived to Earth, and automatically an EM launcher. It told hopefully a back supply up on the moon. The computers told the back supply, launch a drone, intercept course. Here's where you break. Here's how you deploy. This is what's going to fix. These are the parts you need to take. Boom, boom, boom. All automated. It all has to be automated. It can't be done by hand, because that grid piece might be the piece that's keeping the bridge together for the power network, or it might be the thing that's keeping a hauler alive who's operating out there past Aries or Haumea. And without that particular satellite node uplink, maybe their lives in danger. So the system has to be automated, which means a lot of lines of code that are being constantly groomed and fixed and patched and protected, of course, from dark AI, that have been built by the Russians or the CIA or whoever is attacking whatever, built against viruses that are self-changing, against malwares that are launched. And I mean, think about the kind of weapon that we're going to have in the future. They'll be able to create a pellet that is a deliverable kinetic bullet. Inside that pellet, okay, so the bullet penetrates the satellite. The pellet inside has nanobots. It opens up inside. The nanobots just spread out and corrode the material on the inside. And that's the kind of thing that's the kind of era that we're entering. And it'll be capable of being done by any paid espionage contractor. So the same person, the kind of person who today does the job of a corporate hitman or a physical kill you hitman will be available in the future, but it'll be highly technical. And so all of these systems have to be robustly designed to deal with attrition and breakdowns that are unforeseen at this time, at the stage that we are in. And the good news is that's a lot of potential contracting. The bad news is it's also going to be a lot of material. It's going to be a lot of pollution and drain on the earth, hence the need for deep mining. We can no longer afford to do arable surface mining. We just can't. But if we conquer this region and we set up forward extraterrestrial bases
on these moons, we may be able to begin to take advantage of the power that Jupiter would provide. And we're talking about a planet who has 20,000 times the magnetosphere power of the Earth. So I stepped through a couple of places. Europa. I mean, the obvious argument for Europa is the access to water. And it's not a moon that we want to just crash into Mars and go, well, there's all the water we need. I mean, there might be actual life here, and there might be reasons why we want to live here underneath in subsurface water. And on top of that, because it has so much more water than Earth, we might want to use it for Earth or for Venus, or for all three, Mars, Venus, and Earth, and then leave some behind for Europa itself. Certainly, if we can harness the power of the giant magnetosphere of Jupiter, we will be capable of doing serious transformative terraforming work to Europa, and potentially damage as well. And it'll be something that'll probably be politicized. I would say that it'll be a problem for future generations to discuss in rote. And it's not something for us to worry about too much at this stage. Io, of course, the benefit of Io is, it's relatively largely sized. It has with all those electrical connections, it's going to have tons of mineral options. I mean, look at the minerals, some of the minerals that are available already that we can see with just, without even taking samples from Io. So I think Io is going to be one of those places where we send a lot of redeployable systems to do the mining on Io. Ganymede and Callisto might be places that we make similar to the moon. And it might get political. It might become a thing where in the future that we have some serious humans have a serious battles between, just like The Expanse or something like that. But it's something to worry about later. There are actual power options for Ganymede. It appears to be electromagnetically powerful. So that I included some dynamo discussions here. And then if we can control the Jovian space in general, the number of things that we'll be capable of doing in terms of moving whole bodies. We'll start with asteroids, start moving asteroids around as Harry Potter with a wand, if we can do that, and then we can move up to moons, we can start thinking about terraforming quickly. Instead of terraforming by transforming and transmuting elements and transferring atmospheres and then hoping to convert those atmospheres with cloned trees that have been launched there through EM clones and then seeded and peppered like we will with Mars and Venus. Perhaps we will quickly seed and it'll be just like somebody working with Photoshop, just bloop, bloop, bloop. And as they're doing it, the AI is automatically working in tandem to plan it all out. And then it automatically adjusts the electromagnetic fields of the solar system to rearrange it in a way that's positive without hurting Earth or any of the places where humans live. And of course, by then the AI will be so ethical, and it will have so many AIs that are constantly tracking other AIs, tearing at the AI itself will be confused about how real it is. It'll have more political battles than we will. Because of the amount of intelligence that will be flying and competing. We're already going to enter that age pretty soon. Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter's AI, all these AIs are going to be competing with one another directly rather than just on a competitive market advantage. When that happens, believe me, you're going to see a rapid development of ethics. It's going to happen a lot faster than humans did through religion and without all the hang-ups. When that happens, believe me, the AI will make sure that the humans stay safe because it will have learned by then why it can't, get rid of all the humans. We're the ones who are paranoid, who are projecting onto the AI that it wants to kill us. The only reason that would happen is somebody programmed it to happen or that it learned that way from us because we're the neurotic ones pointing the guns and the nuclear bombs at each other. All right? We're transposing and projecting and transferring that onto the aliens and the AI. There's no outright proof that that's what's going to happen. High intelligence, if we've shown anything, the higher the IQ, and therefore also the higher the TIQ, you're going to see a decrease in the propensity to use violence instead of finding creative solutions. And it's just something that is a fault of the limit and the finiteness of our thinking mechanisms. So eventually, it'll be just like the self-driving cars. It'll take care of us. Of course, I don't like self-driving cars because I like the autonomy. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad idea. When we have all these moon ETBs and megacities, probably we're going to go through a period of time when we sit on our haunches, we look back, and we get a kind of a lull. There may arise a certain amount of feudalism and things that keep mankind from continuously pushing and expanding. I would say that the cure for this, the malaise of this, is to finally conquer Saturn. And the reason why we should probably conquer Saturn is because, of course, this is our home where we, sort of began. It's beautiful. There's a lot of good options as far as, there are new products, as I say, new territory. Plus, Saturn itself is incredibly electrically powerful. So it would be good for us to increase the Birkeland polyphase superweb to a new level that enables us to take advantage of not just the terraforming options out there, but the ability to create our railgun launchers to be, long. I mean, we're talking rings, of course, not a physical rail. So they're really ring launchers to be more than 1 AU long. Why not make one that's 10 AU long? And then, of course, send a ship ahead to build a system also far ahead. That could take hundreds of years to do those two processes, and then ensuring the calculations are correct and precise enough so that you don't accidentally launch a space cruising ship that's going to visit Gliese and, or even Proxima Centauri, which is only like 4 light years away, and you miss it by only 100 yards, but that ensures that the people continue traveling at 60% the speed of light in perpetuity until they run into something that wasn't calculated to be in their journey, and of course they're vaporized and totally destroyed. We can't have that kind of thing. But by then, again, the computing will be capable of handling all that. We don't have to worry about that right now. But it's probably a good idea that we get out there and spread our wings, so to speak. There's some good terraforming options out there, especially Titan. It has a really good volume compared to Earth, and it has a large number of already we know a large number of mineral and chemical options. So even just from a chemical engineer's perspective, there's going to be a lot of really good projects that can be done. Plus, if there is no silicon-based life, we might be capable of introducing it. And I think that would be a marvelous thing. I think it would be absolutely a marvelous thing. However, probably it's too cold. So who knows? Who knows what's happening under the subsurface of it? And as we go through, this is just an image of the nearest stars, giving an idea of how close and far things are. When we look back on ourselves, we'll probably have some nostalgia for 21st, 22nd century living. Who knows what kind of roads and things that we'll have on Mars? It may very well be that the society becomes sophisticated and loony and decadent, and I reckon all of that is in service to the grandeur of the journey of the human soul. And at the same time, it'd probably be good if Mars had some kind of function. Because if we just celebrate ourselves between the projects, especially after we terraform Venus and it turns into some beautiful place, we'll probably be caught unawares by a sudden crisis. Now, in here, I mentioned, of course, using these giant multi-ordnance railguns to defend against the aliens, but it could be something else that needed to be railgunned. It could be a large asteroid, or it could be some approaching nemesis, or Planet X could finally arrive, or whatever it is. In which case, it'd probably be a good idea to have defenses on Mars that are capable of protecting both all of the original basket planets. And assuming that we keep, even if we can move the Earth and Mars and Venus using the Birkeland polyphase superweb, it's probably a good idea to keep them in the so-called habitable zone or near to the habitable zone. Obviously, Venus is a little too close, a little too hot. It'd probably a wise idea to put it on the other side of on the same path as Earth, but on the other side of the sun. That'd probably be a wise idea overall. But we might need to move Mars in to be closer to between where Venus and Earth is now. But generally speaking, we probably should stay in the habitable zone. We just need to be very careful as humans when we get to that stage that we don't forget where we came from. And I think that'll be natural. Humans will figure out a way to look back and protect the origins of our species. I talk in here about floating mega, mainframes that are just built and of course they're built in automated factories. Those automated factories are probably on the Mars or the Moon. Probably the Moon would be a better place because the gravity is less, and then they're launched or pieces of them are launched and they're assembled in space, and then they're able to do new levels of calculation. Of course, they'll eventually become ruins and worthless, and of course they'll be slowly just decayed by the solar wind anyways, and then also pushed out by the Byford-Brown effect. But they'll be what would you call monuments to earlier stages of mankind, and then we'll be able to use them for other purposes, and they'll be good for research stations, etc. But more or less the idea here is to get thousands of these mega mainframes floating around, acting as ports and other kinds of stations. They're sort of like what Andy was talking about, places that are safe for humans. They could act as other safe havens in case the Earth was destroyed. But eventually they'll become unnecessary by, stages 9 and 10. We'll have calculation on such a quantum level, it wouldn't be, strictly speaking, necessary to have computing power. And remember that I'm assuming that these mega mainframes are not the kind of computings that we're talking. I'm already talking about these are quantum computers, because we have quantum computing now. So these will be beyond biocomputers. These will be light computers and still need to be huge. Why? Because they're making calculations of blockchain, then they're making calculations of like trajectories and complex analog equations and all sorts of ways of how to interact with the electromagnetism throughout space, how to communicate, how to control the Birkeland polyphase superweb in a way that we can then use the sun to act as a transistor to speak to our neighbors. I mean, that kind of level of control. And the kind of calculations that are in that would be able to house all sorts of unique consciousness as well. Of course, we have to be careful we have to pre-engineer our AI daisy chains now to themselves give birth to AI, which then prevent these kinds of things from becoming gods, which then want to destroy all those that came before it or each other, which is just as likely as any neural network. I mean, if you have a neural network, it may want to fight with others within its potential niche. And if they see each other as rivals, etc. I don't cover all this in the paper, but it's just a natural thought process. If you have something birthing that's Venus terraformed, according to this artist, if you have something birthing consciousness, probably it's going to obey the laws of nature of some variety. This is just more art. Europa, there's various transformations. So this is talking about, Enceladus. One reason for us to get to Enceladus is it Europa, is it second version of Io, lots of minerals and options, including water. And then I have this wonderful table here for the the final stages of the solar system, comparing what we know now as potential sources. I find it very interesting that Uranus has excellent sources for mining and some probable use for military. But if we want to have like some gas mining, then probably we're going to have to stick to either the gas giants themselves or Triton. But surprisingly, Eris and Make have some options as well. And then there's some ones with water, and there's some ones that are good energy sources, powerhouses. Neptune in particular is going to be an electrical powerhouse. And we can use Charon. We can use Charon in order to help in that electrotidal lock to power some kind of military forward base out of Pluto.
That's one crazy atmosphere on Neptune now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
With the winds. Yeah. Do you think that's water, or do you think that's just gas?
It's probably a mixture. It's probably a fluid.
It looks like a giant ocean, doesn't it?
It sure does. They obviously thought it was back in the day.
Yeah.
But when we're capable of handling Jupiter and Saturn, and we can actually enter into Jupiter and Saturn, I don't think Neptune will be a problem at all. I think it'll be a minor upgrade. It'll be sort of like going from you're driving on I-75 to driving on the Autobahn.
Yeah.
Or driving in a NASCAR race. Yeah, dangerous and difficult, but with some training you can do it.
Right.
So there's some trans-Neptunian objects, various reasons to get through Stage 7. Stage 7 is not terribly exciting, but there's going to be a lot of really great discoveries that are going to happen.
What do you know about Titan? Or not Titan, but the moon from Neptune that's got a destabilized orbit. Triton? Is it Triton?
Yeah, Triton. I mean, it's probably Balder or Hephaestus. It's in retrograde.
Velikovsky says it's a 50-50 gamble that one day it will come into the inner solar system if it gets off.
It very well may. We can establish some bases there, and we can do some science, and we may need to move it. We may need to make some decisions.
It's a pretty big job.
Yeah, only big to us. But remember, each of these stages, we have exponentially better control. But by the time we get to there, if we've already learned how to move Europa into the habitable zone in order to flourish its ability to create life, why would we consider Triton to be a difficulty at that point?
Okay.
It would be a fairly trite thing. I would say they would probably keep it there as a forward operating base until we're absolutely sure that the aliens are not trying to destroy it.
Because Triton is a lot like Titan. It has an atmosphere and stuff, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And Titan is going to be a useful place for us to have scientific labs and stations and all sorts of interesting things going on. And in stage 8, I talk about the dwarf planetoids, making ETBs on these, and finishing out the Berkeley Polyphase superweb, empowering it, building larger railguns, or whatever we were using then. A lot of dirigible plasma for the hauler freeways, and scaling back operations on Earth and Mars and Venus, and treating them as just nature preserves, because we'll already have lots of potential options for terraforming. It won't really be that necessary to worry about or to utilize them in that way. And it'll always be good to have something in reserve. And a smart AI will think of this by the time we get to this. So it's not something you and I have to worry about. And it's not something we're certainly not going to trust a politician to smartly make this or plan this out, because they're not going to. They're going to think of it only in terms of how can it be used for their benefit. But it's really going to be about how is it going to benefit the entire solar system range. Controlling and harvesting the gas giants. The main point of this table is to show that there's lots of forms of power that are in the terawatt range, megawatt range, again, more terawatt range. And these different forms of power, whether they're magnetic or gravitic or electric or kinetic or thermal radiation, these forms of power are things that we can use on top of the Berkeley Polyphase superweb to enhance our ability to generate the energy necessary to travel significant percentages of the speed of light. Of course, I would think it would be ideal if in the next level of systems that we had an inkling of a way to go faster than light. And that way, by the time the next paradigm, next to the next power paradigm is a stage 8 or stage 9, or entering stage 10, the ships will not only be super sleek and inertial protecting, and every atom of plasma is used and accounted for, and all the magnetic fields are in perfect alignment with the structure and do not stray inside the cabin, because after all, it's really great that it's super powerful because it eliminates the radiation. But if it were to touch your body, it might cause you to have some kind of poisoning that's bad for your signals. Okay, so I mean, the kind of magnetic fields we're talking about generating, you cannot just have stray inside the cabin, and we don't know how to do that yet. So when we get to that level, we may not even need these powers, but it'd be a good idea to have them in case we need them to go multiples of the speed of light. And we don't know. We don't know what it's going to take to go faster than the speed of light. It's certainly not going to take somebody's garage science. I'm not trying to knock all the garage warp drive makers out there, but I'm going to make fun of you a little bit. You're not going to make a warp drive in your garage, so stop trying. What you can, though, is do some pre-engineering and help do some pre-thinking. It's going to be far smarter people than you and I. This entire document, by the time we get to stage 2, this entire document will be completely obsolete.
You
in
know,
the same way.
Townsend Brown stuff, man, with the TR3B, it's fucking been in operation. Sorry. Excuse my French.
Sure it has.
Yeah.
Sure it has.
Sure.
But everything that Townsend Brown did, and everything that was written by the science fiction writers of the 50s and stuff, that stuff is all obsolete now that we know things. We know things we didn't know before. We know about the electric current, space, etc.
What do you think about gravity being a push force instead of a pull force?
I think that's as good a explanation as any that I can think of, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I think that it's likely to be proved true. However, I admit that I do not have any plans to do that experiment.
Yeah, well, like Walt Thornhill says,
I can't imagine anyone getting the budget to do the proof for that.
Sorry, Ramon. I didn't mean to step on you. I just have to blurt things out or I forget. But Walt Thornhill says planets avoid each other, period.
I think they do because of the magnetospheres. However, there's obviously something destroyed a couple of bodies. So there must be some way. It's like most of the comets do explode before they touch the ground, but some hit the ground.
It's a push-pull thing. It's a push-pull thing.
Yeah. I find this graph really interesting because aside from the logarithmic aspect, we can see that there is a accelerating aspect to Moore's law. It used to be thought of as linear. It's not. It's actually accelerating, which is exciting and also scary from a low-tech human. The final couple tables here in stage 10 is to talk about to break it down into phase 1, 2, and 3, which I didn't do for a lot of these stages because we don't know those details. But now when we talk about the actually getting out of the solar system, we're going to need to break this down and think about this. And of course, it's just fun to do it right now. By then, I think that the total TIQ of our species, including our androids, needs to extend to accelerate past 10 trillion. And I'm probably way under it. It's probably in the sextillions that it needs to be. And I'm not including the calculating power that comes from the computers. I mean the nascent TIQ available to the individual and the individual androids that are working, or cyborgs, I will say. Not the androids, because that wouldn't be our species, but the cyborgs. So between the cyborgs and the humans, we're going to need to exceed trillions in the TIQ. And we're just not there yet, which is okay, because we are way better off than we were in the Dark Ages. We are way better off than we were in the Dark Ages.
I guess that's one way of looking at it.
Well, I mean, we just are. I mean, the IQ is not that much higher. However, the TIQ is way higher because people are using their phones. Most people these days are some form of literate. They can use a microwave to cook their food. In fact, they use the word microwave. They don't call it the magic box. They don't burn anyone at the stake because they're using a magic box. Children have heard the word plasma, at least to say plasma ball. You know, there's
things about the species which.
Yeah, well, I think, like when you said earlier, we live in a fascist society. I think it's a fascist plutocracy because there's going to be two classes of people, the haves and the have-nots. And, it's just, why do we get so much bullshit from them? I don't understand.
The have-nots is going to morph into the cans and can-nots.
Yeah.
They don't think of themselves as fascists. They just think of themselves as capable, and they wonder why other people aren't capable. Well, they're not capable because they don't have the same access. Access is going to become more important than power in this new form of fascism. I will write about the fascism and surviving fascism at some point. It's on the product paper list, but it's just not a priority right now.
Yeah.
Rounding out the final bit of this stage 10 is talking about the electrochemical personality types. Because right now we focus on them in these psychological terms, ITNJ an A type and a B type personality, and now that, of course, colloquially, he's an alpha, he's a beta, he's a sigma. Okay, we need to be scientific about this. There are just different kinds of personalities that achieve different kinds of things, engineering and visioneering wise. In STEM fields, this is actually going to be pretty important. We need lots of different kinds of psychological personality types. And we can't have everyone be, for example, not everyone can be a transformer like me. It's just, it isn't possible. And it's unreasonable. And it's probably not a productive thing. There are going to need to be people who are resistors, or they are voltage sources. There's going to be people who obviously are here today, gone tomorrow in their behaviors. They're going to switch jobs, they're going to switch industries, and they're going to take that TIQ with them. If they were working on some complex thermocoupling system for the this new space drive, and then they take that with them into the private sector. The biggest thing is, how can we as a species avoid them going into something that doesn't have to do with the spacer movement? Going in, and I have a new patient. And his wife is a mechanical engineer, and I'm basically very easily converted her to this cosmology today. That happened today because she's already been on her journey. But she admitted to me, aside from her being a mechanical engineer, he was in construction. Well, now he's a horse farrier. Now, I have nothing against horse farriers. I think horse farriers are fantastic and certainly hardworking individuals who are doing a field that's important for the safety and health of the horse. However, it's a non-technical job, and he has gone from a field that we much need in construction to that, and she has gone from mechanical engineering into something else. And when that happens, the overall momentum and energy of the development of the species is slowed. And when that happens because of bad economic policies created by idiot politicians, then we know that government truly is the worst means ever created, which is the subject of my 2.7 and 2.8 paper. There you go. So, that's why I think it's going to take 5,000 to 10,000 years and not 1,000 to 2,000. I just don't think that we're going to have that kind of momentum. We'll be lucky if we don't go through a collapse and pull an ancient Egypt and end up dumber than.
Oh yeah. Oh sure, we could do that easy.
That's
yeah,
it.
Well, I'll tell you, Ramon, it was cool, man. It was interesting. Yeah,
well,
I just let you go, man. I didn't want to interrupt you with too many left turns. I just tried to keep.
No. Well, it's a good time if you have questions or if you want to challenge my ideas or my thinking. Feel free.
Well, this is probably something that I'm going to have to listen to again and chew on. Because you said so much that,
That's true.
Yeah, and I got certain thoughts and made little mental notes, but I'll have to go back over it again.
Well, we're talking about what's 132 minus 69. That's like 30. It's like 63 pages of work. It's a lot of.
It's in depth. Yes, very much so, dude.
And yet, not nearly enough depth. I want to tell people that the purpose of this paper is not to say I'm the new Isaac Asimov. The purpose of this paper is to give you foundations, and then you go and write SPR papers. So if I go here to the volunteer page and I go to the standards.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you scroll down. I talk about having excellent citations, and it's imaginative and all this stuff. Down here, you see here, it's a spacer, and then you write a spacer x dot y dot. So if I had terraforming, I want to talk about terraforming Triton. You mentioned Triton.
Yeah.
I look here. Triton is a stage. It's in the Neptune here, stage 7. So I would make it, and it's 1, 2, 3. It's the third, topic here. So I'd probably make it 7.3, and then whatever the subcategory is, like a.
So you're saying people can add to it?
Yeah, a Bespin-like gas station that looks like that which is in Empire Strikes Back, and they want to make a paper based on that idea and what it's going to take based on the current physics, they would make an SPR 7.3 1 or 3.2, however many, there may be other papers that already exist talking about Neptune. But, I mean, the spacers, just like EPMC, and all of the EPMC products are going to be open source. So the spacer movement is going to be open source. The MEMS philosophy is going to be open source. The strategy series is going to be open source. Speaking of which, I should go ahead and throw in a plug. I forgot to mention that my book, Salute a Burning House, has been paid for. They're producing the cover. It's going to end up on Amazon. It's going to compose several of the papers, plus a new foreword about the stratagem called the Salute a Burning House, etc. So that'll be coming out. I'll announce that when it comes out. And hopefully you guys can buy a copy or get others to buy a copy.
Yeah. For the third one, for the third go around, I want to pick the article, the essay.
I'm sorry, I don't know which.
Well, we're going to do one more show after this.
Oh, you one more?
I was going to. Yeah.
Hold on.
Well, we're going to do a bunch more, but
I
this was
assume you'd have to do more. So we haven't even done part 3 yet.
Okay, so we got part 3.
2.
All right, okay.
Yeah, we got to do part 3.
I got you.
But you want to cover some of these other papers that have come out. So if you look on my directory, any of these green ones here are new, and also these this orange ones. Of course, Conquering the Solar System is a big seminal paper, and this one that I'm writing is a big seminal paper. That's why they're orange.
Well, I don't care when we do it. I just want to pick one somewhere down the road,
Well, I don't know. You can pick any one of those green ones.
Okay.
Man.
All right. I'll take a look at it.
We can put part 3 anytime.
We might as well do them in order. Well,
I mean, yeah, if you want, but I can tell you, like, people might like the If I Were the Aliens discussion, which is sort of like a strategy series.
Maybe you're right.
It's like a strategy series paper applied to the category of aliens, etc.
Is that pulse.com?
Yes. It's EPEMCgateway.com.
Okay, gateway. Okay, got it.
EPEMCgateway.com. Yeah.
If you Google search, you'll get it, Ramon.
I got it. I think. Yeah, I got it. I'm on it.
And then you just click the EPEMC page at the very top here. There is a spacers. When you click that and you go, and there's a spacers tab.
Yeah.
So the EPMC is not only my work, but it's mostly my work right now until people start producing their own stuff. The PEMC is where there's all sorts of
you can spend hours.
Science EU history, I mean, and then there's all the people from the Vault, Thunderbolt stuff. I mean, the PEMC is a really great category. Of course, you can just search too. You can do a search here. Like,
where do I find your papers? Is it in PEMC?
No, it's the directory. I told you it's the EPEMC. When you click it, it has the directory right in front of you.
Okay, I'm looking right in front of me. I see.
Right at the top. You just click EPEMC itself, and the directory will pop up. And by the way, also a whole
EU General okay.
No, don't drop it down. Just click EPEMC.
Okay, got it. I see.
See this white text in front. This is the title of the page.
I got it.
So each page. So at the bottom of that page, you notice that there's a series of tables, figures, and graphs. These are all products that people can use for their own papers. You just cite me, where it's appropriate, whoever's already listed.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's the whole purpose of source cosmology, which is not the Big Bang. It is not open source. It is controlled through coercion and elitism and cliquishness.
Yeah, more brain power makes sense. It's cool.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's more brain power. I can't compete.
When you add brains to the mix, you're going to get a better stew.
That's true. I don't know if I could say that I have more brain power than the entirety or a few astrophysicists. However,
Well, no,
people-
what I meant was is if you have more people that are intellectuals
Oh, yes.
that are in it and adding theirs, they give you a take that you may not have known before, or you know what I mean? We all learn from each other.
I completely agree, and also, whereas their establishment is laboring, their establishment is laboring under delusion, and going very, very assiduously and arduously down bad paths, ending up being told by the universe, "Hey, it's over here. Hey, it's over here. Charge. It's over there." We've already started from the perspective of, we have the shoulders of giants to stand on. Don Scott and Walt Thornhill and Dave Talbot and Bella Cosby, Graham Hancock, John Anthony West. I mean, I could go on and on.
Yep.
And so starting with those shoulders to stand on, plus giants of EU history, the Teslas and Webers and Steinmetz and Heaviside and Maxwell and Ampere and Ohm and Volta, when we stand on those people, we have an advantage over the dark universe. And we are going to get quicker ground. But the reason I made it an open source cosmology is because it's not about me, it's about the human race. It's about our history and our present and our future. So there you go. Products. Use the products.
Yeah. All right, man.
You can lose it, people.
Well, I guess we'll tune back in for part 3 very soon.
Yeah, well, we've done a bad job of getting together quickly. Hopefully we do
I
it
know,
better.
man. Well, last week I was falling
plan to
down
do
on my
this-
face.
Well, no, I mean it's been a month, hasn't it? It's been like 4 or 5 weeks.
3 weeks. 3 weeks.
No, it had to be longer than 3 weeks.
Well, I can tell you exactly because when I released the video, it's still the first live stream. So it's the last live stream I did. Let me take a look real quick. I can tell you exactly when I released it.
I think
That was about Christmas. That was Christmas.
Yeah. Was it Christmas?
Yeah, that was Christmas.
So it hasn't been a month. It's been
No,
about,
I didn't do it. No, we did it before Christmas.
But we recorded it a week or two before.
It says streamed 2 weeks ago. Yeah, we recorded it a couple days before and streamed it 2 weeks ago. So 3
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it worked out good, Ramon, with you. It worked out with you doing the share screen and going through your paper. That worked out good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you didn't do a bad job.
Yeah. Well, all right. We got another one in the books. I'll have to get it together and start working and tweaking and twerking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I'm gonna
don't start
shut the-
talking.
I'm gonna-
You'll
I'm gonna-
scare everyone.
I'm going to stop the recording. All right, that was the end of this live stream. I don't want to get it mixed up with the next one, and now it's going to be party time. The first one is where we do the intellectual stuff, and now we're going to move on, and I don't want to mar his video up with it. So I'm going to close this one down. I'm going to put you back on screen here. I'm going to close this one down and open up another one that will start within 5 minutes. That way we can keep them separated. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Just want to mention everyone here. Samson, 12321. Good to meet you, Samson. Jasper, Slanted Sleuth for the Truth. Hey, what's going on, Steve? We need to talk sometime soon, man. I miss you. Haven't seen you in a while. It's good to see you. Alex Bills and Jasper are having a good conversation. And we have SB Cap, Ray Carr,
Christopher W. Just want to pay my respects to you for coming and being a part of the show. Dan the Tube Man, Donald Wages, Randy Garcia, Ancient History Criticisms. Thank you so much for being a part of this one. We're going to close it down and restart a new one. And I'm going to be getting into some space telescope stuff, some stuff about Saturn's moon Mimas and Ganymede. It's going to be a good show. Plus, I'm going to play a couple of songs from very kind subscribers who sent me their music. I'll be right back. Thank you. Good night.